Hi everyone. So today we're continuing our look at Romanticism and music. We've looked at the political and the social climate during the 19th century, so the 1800s, and how it reflects itself in music during the period of many isms. Today we're going to look at a couple of the innovations that came from that and some of the developments during the Romantic period. So your lesson overview for today, your learning intentions are to investigate the innovations in music during the Romantic period and draw connections between the seminal works of the Romantic period and those innovations attributed to influential composers. Your success criteria is to be able to define program music and thematic transformation, providing examples from the literature and then applying these musical techniques to your designated works. By now, you should have looked through and listened to your designated work, Tchaikovsky Symphony No. 5, and at least gone through the exposition. Some key vocabulary you need to be listening out for: concrete and abstract art forms, program music, and thematic transformation or idée fixe. So during the Romantic period, you had this explosion of individuality, of style, everyone really appreciating the arts. And so you had a closer association between what we call the concrete arts and the abstract arts. The concrete art forms are your visual arts, so anything that exists in a physical medium, such as sculpture, visual arts, painting, textiles, are all concrete art forms. And you have abstract art forms. So music is an abstract art form because, except for the score, it doesn't exist in a physical medium. It only exists to be heard. Another one you could say is speech or poetry, and the theatre is also an abstract art form as well. So you have a close connection between abstract and concrete art forms, and this found itself in music through the idea of program music. So program music can be defined as instrumental music associated with a story, poem, idea, or scene. This is in stark contrast to what we call absolute music, which can be defined as a self-contained piece of music with no specific story, image, or programmatic reference point. So just as the classical period looked to the ancient Greeks and Romans for a lot of their inspiration, you see that during the operas of Mozart. They draw on many of the ideas and the themes from ancient Greece and ancient Rome. The Romantics saw inspiration from the tales and legends of medieval and Dark Ages times. So program music really draws on the capacity of music to suggest and evoke. So the idea that music can represent something other than itself. So for example, in Beethoven's Symphony No. 6, he writes woodwinds that imitate birdsong. In Smetana's The Moldau, you listen to a continuous flow of notes that evoke a running stream. There are little musical excerpts that will play towards the end of this lecture as well. Composers really sought ways of extending their musicality, ways to represent the physical world inside of their music, and program music was a way of doing that. They didn't always write music to be really literal, but more an expression than a description. In the sense for your course, program music has to have a program with it. It had to be given out to audiences as they enter the concert hall for it to be considered program music. Otherwise, we call it more characteristic music, or something that really emulates or reflects a certain style or a certain idea. There was a sect of Romantic composers who preferred to write music free from any program, instead composing works that we call self-contained and make no reference to external mediums. Brahms was one of the most well-known of these supporters of absolute music. It's the idea that music itself is representative and it doesn't need any external reference point. He never composed an opera or a symphonic poem, but he is still recognized as one of the greatest Romantic composers, and someone who appreciates form as well as feeling. The other thing you need to know are a couple of new forms that appeared during this time. So again, with the desire for individuality and composers extending traditional forms and extending traditional harmony, we led to the development of new symphonic and vocal repertoire. So the idea of symphonic poems or tone poems came out of this. They're a single movement, programmatic work with sections varying in character and tempo. A limited number of themes are developed, repeated, varied, or transformed, and they often use forms that are found in a four-movement symphony. One of the big composers that is attributed to this is Franz Liszt, and he just wanted to extend the idea of a symphony being able to develop he wanted more freedom from what a symphony could offer, but still within one movement work. So kind of a study in expression, these symphonic poems were. The content and form of symphonic poems were often suggested by a picture, a statue, a play, a poem, or some other literary work that is often indicated in the title. You also had the development of what we call lieder or art song. So there's a greater emphasis again on that connection between the concrete and the abstract art forms, including literature, and composers developed on the 18th century tradition of vocal music to develop the romantic lied, or literally, song. Two chief genres came out of this, the lyric and the ballad, and both forms often told stories of the supernatural or drew on old folk tales as well. Composers began to publish them into collections unified with a single characteristic or theme, and that's where we get our song cycle from as well. So during this time, we had composers continually pushing the boundaries of what an orchestra would look like, how long they would play for as well. You had symphonies that went for more than 2 hours. Wagner wrote a song cycle for 4 days. So there was one way, and we've talked about this previously, that they managed to tie this all together. And that's the idea of thematic transformation or idée fixe. So thematic transformation is a compositional technique in which a leitmotif or a theme is developed by changing it through permutation, so your modulation, that sort of thing, augmentation, diminution, and fragmentation. So all of which are compositional devices that you should know. So as symphonies grew longer and longer, composers developed new devices to hold these epics together using a melody as a hook. It often represented a character or an idea, and it was used to guide audiences through the program and through a composition. Hector Berlioz was one of the first pioneers of this technique with his idée fixe in the Symphonie Fantastique. So in this, the theme was represented the beloved, or someone that Berlioz was obsessed over, and it gradually was twisted by fate. The melody is presented firstly in a dolce style, but ultimately ends up being quite grotesque and witchy, as it's performed during a witch's sabbath by an E-flat clarinet, so a little baby clarinet later in the symphony. Idée fixe and thematic transformation. Well, thematic transformation is linked to Liszt again, and idée fixe to Berlioz, but it's not a new concept. For many, many centuries, we have had certain melodies that were used to represent different concepts and ideas. One of the biggest ones was the Dies Irae, which is an ancient Latin hymn from the churches that was sung at masses and at funeral masses. And we see throughout music history the use of the Dies Irae to represent death and to represent the foreboding coming of death. Within your designated work, thematic transformation is used with the motto theme, and that's something that will pop up in your CHA tests as well.